In this video, I solved OnlyForYou, which has a ton of cool exploits and an ending I spent way too much time on.
Really? That's the solution? Oh my god.
This is one of my favorite hack-the-box machines I've solved. It's got so many crazy twists and turns, so definitely give it a shot yourself if you haven't already. Let's jump right into it. Step 1 is running Nmap, a port scanner that tells us which services are running on the box. SC for default scripts, SV for version information, and let's send it to a file so we can look at it later. While that's running, let's take a look and see if there's a web server. And it looks like there is, so let's yeet that into the host file. This server runs with virtual hosting, which means it won't accept requests with just the IP address. It has to have the right hostname in the HTTP host header in order to send back a valid response. And in order to do that, we have to map this IP to the correct hostname in the etc host file. Once that was set up, I started going through the website looking for just general information and seeing if I could find any user input fields. I found a contact form that submitted a post request with name, email, subject, and message. Usually on boxes like these, the contact form is fake and doesn't actually submit anything. So the fact that this form is actually real was a big red flag. Other than that, there wasn't really anything else on this website.
Walter.
I also tried running a couple Dirbuster scans to see if there were any other hidden directories or files, but they returned nothing.
Oh, Nmap's done. Let's go.
The Nmap scan says there's just HTTP on 80 and SSH on 22, and we all know SSH is 100% secure with no vulnerabilities whatsoever. So that means there has to be a vulnerability on the web server. SSH is just a dead end. So after I was done messing around with the website, I started configuring Burp Suite, which is a super useful tool that lets you send custom HTTP requests. I messed around with the contact form for a while, and I didn't find anything.
This contact form's slow as shit.
But it turns out there's actually a really sneaky code injection vulnerability here, which I ended up finding later. I definitely didn't test it hard enough the first time, and I think if I spent some time playing with fuzzers like Fuff or Wfuzz, I think I probably could have found it. I also checked the JWT token, but I didn't find anything there, except for a weird danger message that seemed to only happen some of the time. At this point, I was running out of ideas, so I did a subdomain scan using Wfuzz and the top 5,000 subdomains word list from seclists. This command tries 5,000 different subdomains to see if any of them map to websites on the web server because of virtual hosting. I also added in HC301, which excludes all of the invalid domains. And it actually worked. The scan found beta.onlyforyou.htb, so I added that to the host file. And as an added bonus, we get the entire website source code.
Uh-oh. They're just giving me the source code? That's very funny.
The beta site turned out to be this weird image conversion web app thingy where you can upload, resize, convert, and download images. Looking at the code, I saw a function that checked the file extension to see if it was a JPEG or a PNG. I was excited at first because I thought I might be able to bypass this check and trigger a file upload vulnerability, which happens when you can upload a file that lets you do stuff you shouldn't be able to do, like get code execution, for instance. It also happens to be my favorite type of vulnerability. Unfortunately, I tried replicating the check in Python for quite a few minutes and I couldn't get any bypasses to work, so I moved on and looked at the rest of the code. Looking at the download function, I immediately knew that there was probably a path traversal vulnerability here, where the app allows you to access any file on the system and not just the ones that you're supposed to. First of all, I noticed a big hacking detected printout, which, I mean, there's no way something like that's going to be in an actual production environment, but it's definitely a little hint that we're on the right track. Secondly, the code only checks for ... which can totally be bypassed since it lets you request absolute file paths. The way most path traversals work is there's some code on the backend that processes requests for files, in this case app.py. But if the code doesn't have any filters for the user input, we can do a bit of trolling. ... means go back one directory in the command line, so we can just spam that like 20 times and assume we'll end up at the root directory. And from there, we can access any file we want. This filter does filter out the ... from the query, but it also lets us just put in the absolute path of the file anyway, so we can just bypass it entirely. So all I had to do was replace the default file with whatever file I wanted. The first thing I tried was getting etc password, which has a list of all of the users. And it worked. I also tried getting etc shadow, which has the password hashes of all the users, but of course that didn't work since it's owned by root. But now that I could read pretty much any file I wanted, I spent quite a bit of time just trying to grab a bunch of different files. I had no way of checking if these files even existed, and I didn't really know which ones were going to be useful, so it was overall pretty slow. But I did eventually get the configuration file for Nginx, which is the software that runs the web server. I took a look at that config file and found a couple of other files, an access file and an error file. The error file had a reference to var www beta.onlyforyou.htb, and taking a look at that, it had all the same files I downloaded from the source code earlier. But then, I got an idea. If I could get the source code for the beta site this way, I should also be able to get the source code for the main site. And if I could get the source code for the main site, then I could find out what was up with that lethargic contact form from earlier. And as it turns out, I was able to get the source code. The app.py file doesn't actually have any vulnerable code, but it does include an import of a send message function from form. I originally thought form was going to be a normal Python package, but I discovered it was actually just a custom form.py file in the same directory. So then I grabbed form.py from the server. There's actually a code injection vulnerability here on screen right now. Pause the video right now if you want to try and spot it, but it's definitely a tricky one to find. The way it works is this regex line only checks to see if a valid email address exists in our input, but not if it's the only thing that's in our input. So what we can do is put an email address at the beginning of the line and put whatever we want after it, and this check won't fail. We also have command injection after the dig command, so we can give it a valid email, drop a semicolon in there, and run whatever we want after it. So we can get it to download a reverse shell from our machine and send it to bash, giving us complete shell access on the machine as the www data user. Once we get a shell, step 1 is to try and elevate our privileges. Right now we're the www data user, who has basically no authorization to do anything cool. The best way to start trying to find privilege escalations is running linps, which is the Linux privilege escalation awesome script. To get linps onto the machine, I first hosted it on my machine with Python and downloaded it with wget. Linps is amazing at finding common privilege escalation vulnerabilities, which is why it's always the first thing I run after getting a shell. After running it, I initially didn't find anything, which makes sense because we're just a www data user. But I did see a ton of open ports that weren't there before, which gave me a little bit of hope. To access those ports, I used FRP, which stands for Fast Reverse Proxy. All I had to do was set up a config file forwarding ports 3000, 7474, and 8001, upload the binaries to the machine with wget, and bing bang boom, we can access all of those hidden ports. Port 3000 was running Gauze, which is kind of like a private GitHub server. I couldn't log into this one, so I skipped it for now. Port 3306 was running MySQL, which hosts databases, and I couldn't log into that one either. Port 7474 was running Neo4j, which is graph-based database software, sort of like SQL, but way better. But no luck with the login here either. Port 8001 was a custom login page. One of the first things I do when I see a login page is try the credentials admin just to see if it works, since I've gotten stuck on this in other boxes. And it actually worked here, giving me access to a weird-looking admin site. I found an employee search function that looked like it might be vulnerable to SQL injection, where you can inject custom code into a query that allows you to get whatever you want from the database. I thought it might be vulnerable because when I gave it the apostrophe test, it gave me a 500 server error. And I also saw MySQL running on 3306, but this didn't make sense, because none of the SQL injection tests I was using actually worked, so I knew it had to be something else. Then I remembered Neo4j was running on port 7474, which this search function might be connected to. So I looked to see if there were any injections for Neo4j specifically, and I found a Hacktricks article for Cypher injection, which is basically like SQL injection, but for Neo4j. I tried a lot of the different injections from the article, and most of them didn't work. But then I tried this one, which actually gave me some information. The way the injection works is by exfiltrating the name, version, and edition values from DBMS components, and making it send an HTTP request to my machine with all that juicy data. A few commands later, I exfiltrated the data labels, which told me there were users and employees in the database. I used another command from the Hacktricks article to search for keys related to the user label, which ended up giving me password hashes for the John and admin accounts. I did not expect that to happen at all. I was pretty much just copying and pasting random commands from the article, but hey, we take those. I ended up cracking both passwords with CrackStation, which is a website that hosts a database with a bunch of already cracked passwords. But I had to prove I wasn't a robot first.
Fire hydrant, fire hydrant. That's fire hydrant. Fire hydrant. This is for you. Motorcycle. That also counts. Fuck. This one's easy. Admin.
Armed with my new credentials, I tried using SSH to get into John's account, and it worked. I now had a compromised user account on the box. After grabbing the user hash, I ran sudo-l to see if there were any sudo commands John could run. On Hack the Box machines like this, there's a really good chance that sudo commands will somehow lead to root. John was allowed to run the pip3 download command, but the file had to be a tar.gz, and all the downloads had to be made from port 3000, the GOGS application from earlier. I found out by doing a quick Google search that there was a Python vulnerability that pretty much exactly matched the sudo command. So at this point, I was pretty confident I was on the right track. I downloaded the exploit code, set up the package with a reverse shell, and compiled it. I got into the GitHub page with the credentials from earlier, uploaded it, executed the command, and it didn't work. I got an error saying it wasn't a valid gzip file. The first thing I tried was removing the reverse shell and replacing it with a setuid on bin bash. I thought that maybe my complicated reverse shell exploit code might have messed with it, so I just tried simplifying to see if it would help. I tried again and got the same error as last time. I also ended up crashing the entire server.
Is it dead? Oh no, it's crashed. I crashed it. I crashed the server.
So things weren't going super well. Anyways, when you're trying to get an exploit to work, a good step is to recreate the conditions of the target machine as closely as possible so you can mess with it and see where the error comes from. I first tried to compile the exploit using Python 3.8 since the target machine ran Python 3.8, but that also gave me the same error as before. At this point, I was really starting to run out of ideas, and I started resorting to drastic measures. I created a brand new Ubuntu virtual machine and installed Python 3.8 and the exact version of pip that the server was using. Compiled it there and uploaded that version, but it was still giving me that stupid gzip error. The major breakthrough happened when I tried to actually run the exploit on the Ubuntu machine. And to my surprise, it actually worked.
Are you fucking kidding me?
There was no error telling me that my gzip file was invalid, so I knew that the problem had to be with how the GOGS application hosted the tar.gz. If the GOGS application was giving it the wrong file, then of course that would cause the invalid gzip error. I also knew that Git repositories tend to have raw files saved somewhere, so I used the best hacking tool of all time, that's right, inspect element, to look at the page's HTML and get a link to the raw file hosted on the server. And when I passed that link to the server...
Yes! Yes! Yes!
And with the setuid bit of bin bash set, all I had to do was run it to get root.
Let's go! Holy shit! Let's fucking go!
I hope you enjoyed the video. If you liked this video and would like to see more Hack the Box videos, then subscribe down below. If you have any questions, drop a comment and I'll try to respond.
That's all from me. Peace.